Hey everybody, so what I want to do here with this video is talk to you about the Rebirth one-shot issue and the first three issues of the Deathstroke ongoing series by Christopher Priest from DC Rebirth. Now, on the first three issues, meaning the one-shot and issues 1 and 2, we have Carlos on the artwork. I'm just going to say Carlos just because his name is a bit difficult to pronounce, and if you've watched any of my previous videos, you'll know that I have real difficulty in pronouncing writers and artists' names that are very difficult to pronounce, and I often butcher them and make myself look like a complete idiot. So I'm just going to call him Carlos just for ease of pronunciation. We have Jason Paz on the inking and Jeremy Cox on the colouring on those aforementioned issues. And then with issue 3 we have a new artist with Joe Bennett on the artwork and Bellardino Bravo and Mark Morales on the inks, and once again Jeremy Cox is on the colouring duties. So the Rebirth one-shot opens with a flashback of Slade Wilson taking his two sons, Joseph or Joey and Grant, out camping, and the issue immediately establishes the very dysfunctional family relationship between Slade and his sons, with Slade being a total douchebag towards Grant, and Grant actually yelling at his father for being gone at months at a time and only coming home when it suits him, and as a result Grant storms off angrily into the woods away from his younger brother and away from his father. Now in the present day we have Deathstroke currently on a mission and a contract to help out a tyrannical terrorist dictator by the name of Matthew, otherwise known as Zaki, which translates to the Red Lion. So Slade goes off to complete the contract which he was paid to complete. However, the Red Lion's men seek to take out Deathstroke, but not before citing to Slade their reasons for doing so. And the fact is that if they don't kill him, then the Red Lion will kill both them and their sons before they come of age, so they can exact revenge. So Slade, as a result, takes all the money that the men currently have on them at the moment, and they basically telling them that they've now hired him to protect their families from the Red Lion. So we have a flashback of Slade actually saving his son Grant from a grizzly bear, which he runs into while storming away from his father and his brother in the woods, and Slade actually proceeds to shoot the mother bear, and not before actually chewing Grant up about the fact that bears hibernate in winter, and the fact that if he'd actually paid attention rather than focused on being angry, he would have avoided the bear in the first place, instead of just laying there in the snow and screaming like a little girl instead of trying to run away and try and get himself out of the situation. And it's at this point where Slade's old friend and comrade and brother-in-arms from his days in the military, William Wintergreen, shows up and actually mentions to Slade, look, maybe you should give the kid a hug instead of trying cheering him up about the fact that he obviously nearly got eaten by a grizzly bear. But Slade just sort of brushes this off and says, well, to be honest, it's about time the kid actually grew a pair. And we find out in the present day that Slade's contract and his target is actually William Tokman, aka the Clock King, and actually the original Clock King, who at this day and age is an old man who is having to use an oxygen tank to basically keep himself alive. And the Clock King actually tells Slade that one of his loved ones is currently being held as a captive by forces of the Red Lion. So we have an awesome scene of Slade actually feigning death along with his two conspirators that he took out the money with to protect their families from the boat scene earlier where he was travelling up the river. Basically Slade is feigning his own death, and then he proceeds to silently and stealthily take out all of the guards with his dual swords and his knife before basically bursting into the holding cell, only to discover that the loved one that the Red Lion is currently holding captive is none other than William Wintergreen himself in the present day, who is an old man at this stage. And then issue 1 actually opens with a showcasing the friendship and the camaraderie between Slade and Wintergreen. The two would go on many missions together over the years, both covert and obviously special ops, therefore off the books, etc., when they were both in the military. We also get snippets of Slade's past, which are represented by photographs that, once he was a decorated soldier, he was a devoted husband, a loving father, and now one of the world's deadliest assassins. We also showcase once again the very dysfunctional family aspect of Slade's family life, between the relationship between Slade and his wife Adeline. who accuses Slade of going off on missions with Wintergreen and apparently leaving her to play nanny all the time with the kids. And after the two get reacquainted briefly after being apart for so long, she actually finally tells Slade that she wants a divorce, which Slade just goes, "I know." So he knows the fact that his family life isn't exactly stable, to say the least. And even when Wintergreen shows up and says, "You might want to go after Grant as he's currently running away," Adeline is very indifferent about this, and she just says, "Well, Grant does this every other week." So she's not really all that bothered about it, it seems. And in the present day, Slade and Wintergreen actually managed to track down the Clock King and Matthew, and there's a really cool firefight scene with the two of them actually combining forces to take down the Clock King. And after this is done, Slade actually gets punched by Wintergreen after coming out of a daze, so to speak, thinking that this is just an apparition, this is just a mirage. You know, he's still in his holding cell. You know, he's not actually being rescued, he's actually still in his cell, and Slade isn't actually there to rescue him. And he actually realises in his amazement that it's actually happening, and he punches Slade, saying, "Where the hell were you?" And he just basically was holding out hope that his old friend and comrade would come and rescue him eventually, which of course he did, but of course Slade didn't know at the time that Wintergreen was being held captive. But anyway, the point being is he's now actually rescued his old friend, and they can actually start by finding out who has been systematically taking out members of their old military ops group from years ago when they were still in the military. So issue 2 opens up with Adeline attempting to go off and track down Slade and Wintergreen, and we also get a flash of Joseph or Joey's impending silence. And for those of us who've read the Volume 1 series of Deathstroke the Terminator by Marv Wolfman from back in the 80s, which was a spin-off from the new Teen Titans series, which both he and George Perez brought back to DC Comics in the 1980s, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about with Joey's silence and his eventual transition into the superhero and member of the Teen Titans, or the new Teen Titans I should say, known as Jericho. So for those of us who've read that series and the Teen Titans series that followed, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. So we have a flash of that, and then once again Adeline's indifference about, you know, the fact that she actually talks to Joey in this flashback and says, "Look, I'm going out for a bit, there's food in the microwave, just tell your brother to look out for you." But Joey just tried to tell her, "Well, hang on a minute, Grant ran off, you know, I'm here by myself," and then the door just slams and Adeline just goes off to try and find Slade and Wintergreen, which once again, as I said, shows her indifference towards her kids, which is really quite starkly different and a stark contrast in terms of how Adeline is actually characterised in the New Teen Titans series and the spin-off Deathstroke the Terminator series from the 80s, both penned by Marv Wolfman, as I've mentioned. So basically we have Slade confronting the tech geek of the old military group, now known as Dr. Icon, who is the inventor of the prototype suit that Slade is currently sporting and wearing throughout this series. And the issue finally ends with Wintergreen actually finding out that the next target on the list is actually none other than Rose Wilson, which is Slade's daughter, aka the Ravager. So then issue 3 opens with Slade checking on Rose in her apartment, pretty creepily like actually, standing over his daughter who's currently asleep in the arms of apparently it's not her boyfriend, but anyway, yeah, he's sort of he's standing there just silently and just sort of checking on his daughter all creepy like, and Rose just opens one eyelid and she's like, "Slade?" And then he just disappears because obviously his special ops training and he can pretty much vanish on sight. There's actually a really cool joke later on made by Wintergreen, which was actually really funny on the part of Chris Priest, which I'll touch on in a minute. So Slade actually goes out, Rose actually goes out to stop a contract from being carried out on this old guy who is just sat in the park feeding these birds. There's actually a really great fight scene of Rose easily taking out all the would-be assassins, and Slade actually arrives offering Rose her 2 signature katana swords, asking if his daughter needs help, and she says, "No, I've got this." And then they both drive off once the would-be assassins have been dealt with. Actually, can somebody tell me in the comments when Rose actually developed precognitive abilities, able to see glimpses of her own future? Can somebody tell me that? Was that a new 52 Teen Titans Initiative thingy? Because I've not read any of the new 52 Teen Titans, because I've heard they're pretty much either terrible or god-awful, so I stayed well away from those books, if I'm totally honest. So if somebody can tell me, that would be greatly appreciated. Funny enough, when Wintergreen and Slade go to visit one of their old contacts in Scotland, who's currently running a bar and apparently having to scrape by for every penny that he earns, there's actually a really great scene where Slade actually finishes his drink and just silently disappears, and Wintergreen actually makes a quip and a joke about the fact that Slade was doing that long before Batman was doing it. So the whole disappearing silently without anybody realising you're gone, apparently Slade actually invented that trick and not Batman. So that was a really cool little funny comment on the part of Wintergreen, and a little bit of a quip towards Batman on the part of Chris Priest, which is actually the first ever, this is the first ever Christopher Priest series that I've read from him. I'm actually really quite interested and intrigued to read the Black Panther run that he did with the Marvel Knights Initiative back in the late 90s, I believe, along with Kevin Smith's reboot of Green Arrow and also his reboot of Daredevil, which was then subsequently taken over by Brian Michael Bendis not long afterwards. So I'm interested in reading that series, and luckily Marvel have just put out 4 complete collection volumes or trade paperbacks of that series, so I'm going to pick those up eventually and read that series, because apparently Chris Priest's run on the Black Panther from Marvel is considered to be the definitive and one of the best, if not the best, runs on the character of Black Panther or T'Challa in the character's history. So anyway, there's a great conversation on a rooftop with Slade and Rose, where Slade believes that Rose isn't actually ready for anything, even though on some level he believes that his daughter still actually cares about what her father actually thinks of her on some level at the very least. But Slade just tells her, look, you're doing everything that apparently every other empty-headed nitwit teenager does with their lives, which is partying with their friends, taking drugs and sleeping around, etc. So Slade is even a douchebag to his only daughter, even more so than when he was a douchebag in the flashbacks with a younger Joey and a younger Grant when they were on that camping trip, and basically Grant storming off and running afoul of that grizzly bear. So even with the years gone by, Slade is still a douchebag to his kids, which again is, it's kind of this double-edged sword for Slade, where on the one hand he does care about his family and his kids particularly, but at the same time he's a villain, he's an anti-hero. They kind of, I think Chris Priest is trying to restore the continuity and the characterization of the Marv Wolfman penned characterization of the new Teen Titans and the Deathstroke, the Terminator characterization of Slade Wilson, or of Deathstroke, where he's a cross between an anti-hero and a villain, and not a full-fledged villain. So that's really interesting to me at the very least. And for those of you who might be wondering why I keep referencing the Marv Wolfman series, I've got the full run in singles, so I'll probably be doing a series of videos on that at some point in the foreseeable future, as well as the Marv Wolfman and George Perez new Teen Titans series as well. So that's another series you can look forward to in the foreseeable future on my channel. Anyway, so aside from that quick plug and that quick side note, so yeah, that was a really great conversation between the two characters, and there's actually a really brutal scene towards the end of the issue where Adeline actually puts the final nail in the coffin in terms of the dysfunctional family aspect of Slade's family life, whereby we actually see the results of Slade's endeavours as a mercenary and as an assassin come back to haunt him with what happens to Joey. And for those of you who've read, as I said, the new Teen Titans series and the Deathstroke the Terminator series from the 80s, you'll know what happens to Joseph, and you know what he eventually transitions into becoming the hero known as Jericho and the member of the Teen Titans. But for those of you who haven't, or those of you who may be wondering what Chris Priest is trying to restore from the previous continuity as opposed to the new 52, I won't spoil it, but it's definitely a very harrowing scene and a very character-defining moment for the character of Slade Wilson. And actually, Adeline actually as I said, with this one act, Christopher Priest actually restores the continuity of the Deathstroke character and the dysfunctional family aspect of Slade Wilson, with Adeline actually telling Slade, I'm going to sort this situation out now rather than wait for the paramedics to arrive, and she exacts her revenge on her husband for putting their son in the predicament that he's in by actually shooting him point blank range in the back of the head and subsequently blowing out her husband's right eye, which Adeline did again back in the 80s, and she's doing it now in the flashback in this series as well. So once again we have Slade's sort of trademark blindness in his right eye being restored the proper way, by way of obviously Adeline exacting her revenge on her husband for the dire consequence and the result of Slade's endeavours as a mercenary and as an assassin coming back to haunt members of his family, and as I've said, putting Joey in the lifelong impediment that Joey is now going to suffer from for the rest of his life. So that was a really interesting and a really great scene to see the old continuity restored on the part of Chris Priest. And basically, I'm not going to spoil how the issue ends, but for those of you who've seen the cover to issue 4 and also read the final scene and the exchange between Wintergreen and Slade, you'll know where he's currently heading as of next issue, so I'm not going to spoil that. But it's going to be interesting to see Slade go up against a certain would-be antagonist and a would-be worthy foe and adversary of Deathstroke, which I'm not going to spoil as I've said, but for those of you who read the issue, you know what I'm talking about and where he's going to be going or heading next issue. So overall, I really thoroughly enjoyed the first 4 issues of this, counting the Rebirth issue of Christopher Priest's run on Deathstroke. Artistically, I really like Carlos's artwork, and also I have to say that the inkers and the colorists that I've mentioned at the beginning of the video do a fantastic job of bringing the artwork to life. I wanted to really sort of dissect and talk about these issues at length because I've thoroughly really enjoyed this series, and it's a series that is, for me anyway, a sleeper hit, whereby, like I said, I've not read, I've read a few issues here and there of Deathstroke's appearances, in the Teen Titans, in Green Arrow, in Batman, that kind of thing, but I've never read Slade in his own ongoing series up until now, obviously with the Rebirth series with Chris Priest doing the writing, and as I've said, I'll do a series of videos eventually on the run by Marv Wolfman, along with Marv Wolfman's run on the new Teen Titans. So it's interesting for me to see the old continuity restored of the character of Slade Wilson, because he is a really fascinating character in the way that he operates and the way that he carries himself. As like I said, he's on the one hand, he's he's one of the world's deadliest assassins and a world-class mercenary, but also at the same time he's conflicted. He's a character that's very three-dimensional and very multifaceted, and is a very interesting character to explore throughout the course of a series. For those of you who don't know, the guy who plays Slade in the True Blood series, he will be playing Deathstroke in the live-action Ben Affleck Batman film. For those of you who know Deathstroke already from the Arrow TV series, played fantastically, by the way, by Manu Bennett, who many of you may remember from the Starz Spartacus TV series where he played Crixus, but also some of you may remember him from being voiced in the new DC animated universe series of films, particularly in Son of Batman, voiced by Thomas Gibson, or also some of you may remember the Teen Titans animated series where he was actually voiced by Ron Perlman, who I actually prefer as the animated universe voice for Slade Wilson. I just think Ron Perlman just does a phenomenal job of voicing Deathstroke or Slade or the Terminator, whatever you wish to call him. I really think, for me, I think Ron Perlman is the definitive voice for Slade Wilson, in much the same way as Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill are, for many people, the definitive voices for Batman and the Joker. Not to discredit anyone that has voiced the characters in the subsequent films and whatnot, but I do think that for many, as I've said, those two gentlemen are the definitive voices for those two characters within the DC animated universe and the subsequent spin-offs in the Arkham video game series, etc. So yeah, I think Ron Perlman is my personal favourite voice actor for the character of Deathstroke. And of course, I've always been a big fan of the guy, especially if I'm watching the Sons of Anarchy FX series, or long-standing TV series which ran for 7 years, which Ron Perlman had a long-standing role in that series. And if you haven't checked it out, highly recommend you check it out. It's basically, not to quote the back of the DVD, I don't do it normally, but it's basically The Sopranos on motorcycles, or The Sopranos meets the Hells Angels meets the motorcycle club, basically, or an outlaw motorcycle club, I should say. But anyway, I've rambled on for long enough. Thank you everybody for watching and listening. As always, hope you all enjoyed. As always, feel free to leave a comment below in the comment section if you enjoyed the video. Tell me what you think of the series so far and what you think of Chris Priest's writing of the character of Slade Wilson. Tell me if you've been following the series or if you're going to pick up the series in trade. And also, as I've said, if somebody can tell me where Rose actually developed her precognitive abilities, that would be greatly appreciated. Once again, thank you all for watching and listening, and this is your host, Gambit896, signing off, and I will see you guys next time with another video. Take care.